Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to another week of online learning. This is the lesson for May 4th, for the week of May 4th. I don't have a picture this time on my video because some of these slides have a lot of information and I didn't want to block it with my picture. So, by this point you should have sent me a proposal for a topic and I should have responded to that. You should have sent me a list of interview questions that you plan to ask and gotten some brief feedback before you send that out. And then you should have sent those questions to your sources. So if you haven't done those things, make sure you do those as soon as you can. And then once you've done those things, you should be caught up. So what we're doing this week is we are working on drafting our articles. So first of all, I want to congratulate everyone so far that has gotten an article published, the Q3 articles that we've done. If you had everything done, if you went in and accepted or added some edits based on my feedback, and if you have a headline that works, that has an active verb, if you have a picture, and if you had a caption, they should have been sent to admin for approval. If you've done all those things and you don't see your article up at blogs.lcps.org/theloudoundrader, please send me a follow-up email. It could be that I thought we were waiting for something that we actually have. It could be that it's being held up in administration. They do have to approve everything. But please, if you don't see your article up there, let me know. And we do have a few students who have already gone ahead and written their fourth quarter articles, which is amazing. So those are up as well. As soon as they get approved, I put them up there. The plan is to take those articles that are up at blogs.lcps.org, the Loudoun Raider, and I'm going to format them into a PDF that looks like our print edition. And for VHSL, we have a competition at the end of the year that I still hope to enter, and they take 3 print editions. This year they're accepting PDF versions of the print. So we are going to make a Q3 PDF and a Q4 PDF. So if I have your article, if it's approved, if it has a headline, photo, and caption, it will appear in that print PDF. The benefit of not physically printing is that I don't have to worry this issue about page numbers. Normally we have to print everything in multiples of 4 just because of the way paper is folded. So this time we don't have to worry about that. So I can fit as many or as few articles as I need to in the PDF. So that means anyone whose article is finished and acceptable quality will get in to our PDF edition. All right, so at this point you should have done your interviews, and so you should have an audio file. Depending how you did this, you should have a text file. Maybe you have an email back and forth, some kind of interview, depending whether you're able to call someone or you interviewed a family member or you did a text or any kind of private message for any social app. You want to have that raw text file or that audio file, and that's what we're going to be working with this week. So if you have asked effective open-ended questions that force people to answer, and we talked about this instead of, how was school today? Good. Tell me about something you did at school, right? Then they're forced to talk about it. If you ask those, you should have usable information, but it might be too long, it might be jumbled, it might be incoherent, it might be disorganized, but there are gems of information in there that you want to include in your article. So what's next? The first step, if you have an audio, you need to transcribe it. So if you did, I know some phone apps do transcribe it for you and they're pretty accurate. But if you do have an audio interview that you recorded, like with a parent or a sister or a relative over the phone, you want to try to write down the responses as soon as you can because it's going to be fresh in your mind so you can write it down quickly and effectively. You can skip anything that's off topic or that you're 100% sure you're not using. So if you're interviewing someone who loves to talk and they start talking about like running shoes or something like that that has nothing to do with what you're writing, you can just skip that. You don't have to write it down. But if you know it could be important or you know for sure it's important, then write that down. In any case, you want to delete words like like. Those are called interrupters. Don't do a find replace because the word like is allowed in some cases. It's just not allowed when we use it as an interrupter. An interrupter would be not this. I like pizza. That's fine. But my favorite kind of pizza is like pepperoni and like sausage. Those two likes are interrupters. They're not part of the actual sentence. But if I say I like pizza, I'm saying I enjoy pizza. You can leave that like in there. So any kind of interrupters, you want to take those out. They're not part of the actual quote. We don't mean to say them. And if you leave them in there as part of the quote, it does make people seem less intelligent and sound less intelligent, but the fact is most of us use interrupters all the time, so we can take those out. The second thing, you want to divide out useful quotes versus useful information. So some people interview really well. Almost everything they say is a soundbite. It sounds great, it'll be great as a quote. Not everyone is like that. So you want to go through your transcription, what you wrote down from the interview, or if you have just the raw text file that someone sent you, go through that. If you have the app that transcribes for you, just copy and paste that into a Google Doc. So you should have all your words in a Google Doc. I want you to first highlight sections that are so well stated that you want to use those as direct quotes. This is something that's articulate, it gets right to the point, it makes sense as kind of a self-enclosed bit of information. These are going to become the quotes that you'll use in your article. The next step, and this is the hardest one, it's to look at anything that's not highlighted. So some of it's going to be junk. If you want to cross through it, there's that strike through font you could use. You could turn it a different color. You could turn it like bright yellow because you know you're not going to use it. So there is junk that you're not going to use. But there's also important information in there that wasn't highlighted. So sometimes the interviewer doesn't speak clearly or coherently. They have good information, but it's scattered. Sometimes they have trouble getting their ideas in order. They're nervous from being interviewed. But there are ideas that are worth mentioning. Maybe they mention half of an idea in the first half of the interview, and then the second half of the idea comes 5 minutes later. You want to make sure maybe in a different color or change the font color. Turn those ideas into a different color so that you know these are ideas that I want to include. They're not necessarily stated in the right way or a good way to quote, but I want to include those actual ideas. So you have your interview, you've gone through and you've highlighted what you want to use as direct quotes and what you want to use as information. So now we have to go back to that LQTQ format, lead, quote, transition, quote. And I put on this week's lesson, there's 2 PDFs. One is a reminder of what the LQTQ format is, and another is a very simple article. I think we've read it in class probably several times, a simple article that demonstrates the LQTQ format. Take a look at that. If you forgot or you're stuck or your article doesn't sound right, take a look at that. So the first thing you want to identify is what is your lead. Think about your lead as your hook. Just like you're writing an essay for English class, your lead or your hook is what's going to entice the reader to read your article. Most readers are lazy, we're pressed for time. Even if we have a lot of time on our hands, most readers would rather be playing a video game or watching TV or staring at the wall than reading an article. So you want to hook them so they read your article. So for example, in an article about a neighborhood that is leaving inspiring chalk messages at the end of driveways, I've seen this happen a lot. And this is just a hypothetical example I'm going to use for this presentation. So the angle is going to be related to your hook, which is going to be related to your headline. By reading the headline and your hook, I should get a feel immediately for the article and decide whether I want to read it or not. So the angle for this hypothetical article might be that it was actually a 4-year-old who lives in the neighborhood that came up with the idea to chalk driveways. The lead might be an emotional hook about the 4-year-old having trouble with being trapped inside, maybe not being able to play with other kids. The headline might be something like, in a world of distancing, a child inspires connections. So inspires is the active verb. So going through your notes, you should have a lead that jumps out at you, or at least an idea for the lead, an angle, and a headline. You want to make sure you do that first, because if you don't have that, this is kind of your roadmap, your lead and your angle. That's guiding your article. If you don't have that, you're just going to ramble and put facts together. All right, so back to that LQTQ format, quotes and transitions. So what I would do at this point, you have your quotes highlighted, you have your information in a different color that you want to paraphrase. Open up a new Google Doc. We're going to start your article. So at the top, you should have thought of a headline or a headline idea at least. Write your headline at the top, and it's okay if you want to or need to revise your headline later. Just write the idea at the top so it's a constant reminder this is what my article is about. So in my hypothetical example, I want to focus on this fact that the 4-year-old is inspiring people. Then you want to go through your quotes. Look at all the highlighted quotes, paste them into your new Google Documents, all the quotes that you absolutely have to have. This way you'll know, this is what I want to include. Once you see them in your Google Doc, try to think of what order they might be most effective in. You want to start with a strong quote and then end with a strong quote. The transitions, the T, help us understand why the quotes are there. And usually the transitions are the hardest thing to do in the article. So I want to go through an example with you. So the T and the Q, the transition and the quote. In the example of the 4-year-old, you might have a quote from the child's mother, and it's a good quote, and it's in red in this presentation. It was really, really hard for her, Jane Smith said. How do you tell a 4-year-old she can't play with her friends? So the quote out of context doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's a good quote and it has emotional impact, but your transition is necessary to help us understand why the quote is important. So here's an example transition, and this is something that you would be writing to help us understand why the quote is relevant, but it's something that you would be writing based on some of that other information in your interview that wasn't necessarily strongly worded enough to be a quote, but it's information that you identified as being important enough to keep. So example, Leesburg mother Jane Smith had read all the child care books she could. She talked to her pediatrician about what to expect when raising a child. Teething, development of language, learning to write. She thought she was prepared for anything, but none of that prepared her for the lockdowns and social distancing mandated by the state in late March. So we have this kind of intro going on. We have, this could be a hook. Leesburg mother had read all the child care books. That could be our hook, actually, depending how, if you wanted to focus on the mother or the daughter. So this part that I'm kind of badly highlighting in yellow could all be the hook. We're kind of doing an emotional appeal. There's this prepared mother, and then all of a sudden the situation hits her where she has no idea how to help her daughter. So that could be your hook. This blue, but none of that. This is going to be your transition into the quote. So if you look at the next slide, here it is put together, broken down by paragraph. So the hook. Leesburg mother Jane Smith had read all the child care books she could. She talked to her pediatrician about what to expect when raising a child. Teething, development of language, learning to write. She thought she was prepared for anything, but none of that prepared her for the lockdowns and social distancing mandated by the state in late March. Quote, it was really, really hard for her, Jane Smith said. How do you tell a 4-year-old she can't play with her friends? Betty Smith, age 4, had attended Rainy Day Preschool in Leesburg until March 16th, when her mother decided to pull her in the fears of the coronavirus. So we have a quote in red, sandwiched between two transitions. We have the hook that's written in black, the first transition in blue, then we have the first quote in red, and the second transition in blue. Now, the fact that Betty Smith, her name is Betty Smith, the fact that she's age 4, the fact that she attended Rainy Day Preschool, and the fact that her last day was March 16th or March 15th, those are all pieces of information that I would only have gotten through an interview with her mother. So these would be things I would have highlighted on my interview sheet as important facts, but not necessarily good enough to appear in quotes. How to end your article, the kicker quote. You want to try to end with a kicker quote, and it should be something that kind of summarizes the article, leaves us with an additional thought, something of that effect. It should be something memorable. I would say it's important to end with a better quote than start with a quote. So you want to really save your best quote for the end, if it makes sense. The kicker quote is often thought-provoking or something like that. But keep in mind that you yourself, as the journalist or the author, are not allowed to or not supposed to express your opinion in a regular news piece. If you're writing opinion, I know a couple of you are doing opinion, that's a little bit different, and I'll work with you on that. But if you're writing a news story, you cannot express your opinion. You're supposed to be a very neutral vessel through which news passes to the consumer. So a lot of times, students on my newspaper staff will try to end with a very positive, upbeat idea, but it's biased and it's coming from them, and you can't do that. You need to find a kicker quote from someone else. So an example of a biased ending to the article that you could not, I will not let it get published. The school wouldn't let it get published. It goes against journalistic standards. This is in your own words. Despite the negatives of the coronavirus crisis, the world is a better place when everyone has to take time to slow down. That's definitely an opinion, and you, the journalist, are not allowed to convey your opinion in a news piece. So that would be too biased. If you wanted to end with that idea because you saw that coming through the interviews, you could find a source that says that. So this example is not biased because it's attributed to a source. Even though there are frightening downsides to the coronavirus, I choose to see the silver lining, said Smith. The world is a better place when everyone has to take time to slow down. If you do not have a kicker quote, I would try to conduct a follow-up. If you kind of know what idea you're going for and you know that someone you interviewed shares the idea, but they just didn't coherently put an idea together in words, you could send them a quick text or email or whatever method you use to contact them and say, I remember in our interview you talked about how even though there are negatives, the world was a better place. Can you clarify your thoughts on that? And if you ask them to clarify, they're going to think a little bit more about it and they'll give you something that you can use. So don't be afraid to do a follow-up. And if you're feeling like you're bothering someone, I always tell my newspaper staff, you can always blame me. I'm the evil teacher. Sorry, I should turn my phone on silent. I'm the evil teacher, you can blame me. That way it takes the onus off of you. So what you should be doing this week is you should have your questions from your interview hopefully answered. If you don't have those, please reach out, follow up, or send out your questions if you haven't. As soon as you get them back, please put them together into a draft. When you're done with the draft, send it to me, even if you're not super proud of it, if you think it's rough or anything like that. Just send me what you have because I can only help you if I get something from you. So as always, send me email with questions. I'll respond definitely within 24 hours, usually much faster than that. I hope everyone's doing well, and I'll see you soon.